So in today's video, we're going to be looking at how to code an overlay, which is basically another scene in your mobile app game that's going to sit on top of the one that you've just been playing in. So these are often used for things like when a player has successfully won a game of Tic Tac Toe, for example. So we're going to have a quick demo right at the beginning of this on an app that I've already built, and then we're going to crack on with this tutorial today in learning how to build one for our Tic Tac Toe game. Okay, so welcome back. My name's Angela McCall. This is Point and Click Puzzle Games, a small YouTube channel dedicated to helping people learn how to program in the Lua programming language. Now, Lua is a fabulous tool for building mobile app games, as well as things like Roblox. So if you haven't been here before, please do subscribe to my channel, click the bell button to stay notified as to when I publish other videos, and if you do have any questions or queries, please put them in the comments below. I would love to know your take on things, and if there are questions that you guys are coming up with that I presume you know and actually you don't, so I can make my videos much more powerful for you. So in the last few videos in this series, we have been building a Tic Tac Toe or a noughts and crosses mobile app game, and in today's video we're going to now actually learn how to create and understand what an overlay is. Now essentially that is another scene that sits on top visually the gameplay scene that we have just been playing, and we're going to invoke that. At the moment a winning line or a draw has been determined by our players whilst they're playing their tic-tac-toe or a game of noughts and crosses. Okay, so let's dive on over to my left-hand monitor, whereby I've got a version of noughts and crosses that I've already published available. Okay, and we're just going to quickly jump on in. Now, by the time we finished building our app, you will have had all of these controls available to you. But for the moment, I just want to show you what an overlay is. Now, as I place this fifth character on the screen is going to dim. A little chiming bell to say success is going to play, and you're still going to see, there we go, the game underneath. So this at the moment is a second scene that is now sitting visually on top of our other. So it's almost like layers again, and we've covered layers in other tutorials as well as on my McCall Media TV YouTube channel when I talk about different layers in graphics. It's exactly the same principle, but instead of layering up different images, we are layering up scenes. So the bottom scene at the moment is our gameplay 1 scene .lua file, and now we've got this overlay scene sitting on top. So let's take a look at the overlay. So what we've done, we have now got a little winning message for player 2. If you actually look carefully behind, we have actually changed that message, so there's no more player 1 turn or player 2 turn. That actual message is now congratulating the winner. Text is its own rule, and we'll cover that in a bit more detail, but we've also added 2 buttons. One as in play another game, and 2 if you just want to check how that game came to be. We've got this kind of like preview the button, but to go back and see what the game is, to sort of basically hide the overlay. But you can't move off, so your cursor can't move off. As soon as I release my finger off the left mouse button, the overlay comes back. So that's just a kind of nice little usability feature. Now, we're not necessarily going to design these buttons in today's video. That's going to be the video that follows this, but we are looking at the logic and strategy that invokes an overlay and how it operates within inside the Lua programming environment in this situation. So let me close this and let's go back to our actual tic-tac-toe. There we go. Right, so in the last video we left this whereby we have got to a point where we draw a winning line and we can actually carry on playing. Now we're going to control the fact that this is happening by the overlay. So the moment that winning line happens, we are going to then display the overlay, and the overlay itself is going to prevent any further clicks on the board, which will stop that problem occurring. So how do we build that? Well, first of all, we're going to start by creating a new scene. So let me just expand this over here. Now I've got this setting quite small because there's quite a lot involved today. I will try and enlarge it best I can for you guys, but you might have to zoom in a little bit on your monitor screen to look at the code as we progress through today's tutorial. Now, if you remember back in one of the first tutorials we did in this, we created a scene template. All I'm going to do for the moment, so that we keep that template nice and true to itself so we can use it in the future, is I'm literally just going to copy all the code, I'm going to close it, and then I'm going to just create a new file, an empty file, and I'm going to paste. Okay, and we're going to file, save as, and we're going to just call this is overlay winning game. Okay, and as you can see, we're in our Tic Tac Toe folder. We've got our config file, GP1, that's the actual gameplay file, the main Lua file that controls the app, and our scene template that we will delete when the game is ready to be published. But for now, we're going to just create this Lua. We know it's a file, Lua type, and I'm just going to hit save. And now you can see the name up here. So the first thing I'm going to do, just so that you guys can follow the logic of the gameplay in the console over here, is I'm just going to name the file in these sections. Now, if you remember, we did this back in our GP1 file back a few tutorials ago, so that we can actually track how the app itself is managing all of the different scenes and so forth. So overlay winning game, winning game. So I'm just going to copy this all the way down. So we're making sure that every time we call one of the scene events, we can see that the file itself is loaded, and if it's in will show, did show, will hide, did hide, or if it's actually invoking the destroy function. And we are going to be using all of these, so I'm just going to save that. Okay, right, so technically we have a scene, but there is nothing in it, there's nothing going on. So one of the first things we're going to do now is we're going to actually set up an image that's going to act as a semi-translucent background, so it's going to cover the entire display of our game. Okay, so in order to just save a little bit of time, because a lot of what we're going to do now to set up this scene we've covered in previous tutorials, I am literally just going to copy and paste some code from our gameplay one, and I'm just going to pop that in here in the create. So all I'm doing at the moment, as you can see there, is creating 3 groups. We've got a background, a main, and a user interface, because just in the same way as a regular scene, we're still going to have to control the environment a little bit. And then the next one I'm just going to copy and paste in is into the create scene is the overlay background. Now the next thing I need to do, let's just walk you through this just real quick. So it's using the display new rectangle API library. I've put it into the group background. I'm displaying the content center on the screen on the X and the Y axis, and I've actually set its width and its height. Okay, the overlay is essentially just a rectangle, which color I've set to black, and then I'm setting the alpha of that color to 70%, 0.7% fill. So you will then get 30% of the background or the underlying scene showing through. Now the only thing I haven't done, just real quick, is I haven't created the variables. Now the reason I'm putting these variables outside of the scene events is so that they are accessible, or the content of them are accessible from all of the different scene events, because it's more in like the master file, as it were. Okay, so that's kind of set up our overlay file. As you can see, there's a little dot, so I'm just going to hit Control S on our keyboard. Nothing's going to happen yet because we've not got anything in our gameplay scene calling this particular overlay. But you can see here right now, with just those few things that I've done, that actually an overlay doesn't have a huge amount to it. Essentially, the only thing that we're going to do now after this is add some buttons, which will be in the next video, and we are going to obviously call the events and manage those events. But pretty much this is our overlay scene set up. So what I'm going to do, let's just close this for a second and then go back to our files, and I'm just going to open the GP1, which is the gameplay 1 file. So in this particular app, there is only going to be the 1 file that's going to be managing the gameplay. Okay, so the overlay is going to be called twice. It's going to be called if there is a winning line or if there is a draw. So we don't want to repeat the code. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll on up to the top of my game, and you can see here that we've got some of the other variables and things that have already been populated. And if we quickly dive on over to the Corona Labs or the Solar 2D documentation, you can see here I've already navigated to where it says the composer library and the show overlay. And what we've got going on here is the fact that the syntax itself needs to call a scene name and provide it a list of options. Now those options are basically the controls on how that scene is going to be managed when it is displayed. And if you look down here, they've got an example template that we can borrow, and then they've got the whole sort of examples going on. So I'll let you go through that in your own time, just so that you can find out more about it. They've also got some actual overlay tutorials and things that you can also go and read up about in some of their actual documentation and tutorials as well. So let's just start off by, I'm just going to minimize that. Now obviously I've already designed this overlay in that game that I've just showed you, so I'm literally just going to copy in now what I've called the overlay options, and I'm just going to paste it on screen and talk you through it. So my overlay options is isModal equals true, effect is to fade, so that's how the transition comes onto the screen. It's going to take basically 0.4 seconds. Don't forget, everything in computer code is timed in milliseconds, which is 1/1000th of a second. So 400 is essentially 0.4 of a second, and then there has to be a text field. So for the moment I'm just going to put XXX, but we're not really going to actually use it. I've just got that so I can populate the options here. Now isModal is true. This is something that you need to bear in mind, because this is what's going to control the interface being accessible in the gameplay scene or not. So we don't want it to be possible for our players to continue to put characters on the board. So we're going to say true so that it prevents all interaction on the gameplay one scene below it. And if we jump back over to where it says show overlay, I just want to quickly point out here, it does show as one of the parameters of the options variable that we're creating isModal. It is optional. It's a Boolean value, so it can only be set to true or false. Okay. When set to true, this prevents touches from passing through the overlay scene to objects in the underlying scene. So I just wanted to point out where you can find out and understand a little bit more about it. So hopefully that is something you can play with and see and test for yourself. So now we've got this all set up, I'm going to hit save. What we actually now need to do is call the overlay to show on our game. So let's go down and let's handle this first of all in the draw. So there's a win, lose or draw. Down here we've got the code. Oh, I've lost it. There we go. Win, lose or draw. So right now, the moment that this has happened, we've updated the message, and what we want to do is now call the composer overlaying scenes. Again, if we pop back to our documentation, there's the syntax. I'm just going to copy the whole thing, paste it into our code. Okay, and then I just need to swap out these different items of text to be specific to my game. So the scene name, we called it, let me just expand this file a little bit more. There we go. So there's my file name, and if we rename it, we'll be able to access it. So I'm just going to copy, and then there's my scene name, paste. Okay, now we don't need to actually paste in the file extension, so I can delete the .lua. And then obviously if we come back up to the top of our game, up here we've got the options, and I've called it overlay options. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to replace my syntax that I've just copied over. Where is it? Here we go. So I'm just going to put comma, and then the second piece of data that I'm going to send it is the variable that contains all the overlay options, and I'm going to hit save. Finally, the last thing that we need to do, if you look down at some of the examples they've got going on here, if you actually look at, well, that's the hide overlay, but it's pretty much the same principle. There's the show overlay. You can see that the file itself, the .lua file that we're going to open, is actually shown with inside speech marks. If we come on over here, you can see there's the file name. I've put it inside the speech marks. I've removed the .lua file name. I'm just going to hit save, which should relaunch the game. And now, if I create a draw situation, so there's a stalemate in the game, no one's a winner, we now have our overlay showing, but our message hasn't updated, so we do need to just maybe double check this. But it does mean that this code is actually working. The composer itself has shown up there, and you can see that everything is now dimmed. Now to get out of this, obviously I have to relaunch or refresh the game. So if I click on the app and hit R, Control R, it will refresh the game, and I can quickly basically test why this hasn't updated. Okay, so the reason that my little message on screen didn't update is if you think of the logic of the game being executed. So it's come down here, the noughts has been placed on the board, it's got a check, win, lose or draw. So it's going up to our function here, check, win, lose or draw, and then it's executing this code. But of course, when this code has finished being executed, even if we are printing the winning line over here in the console and we know what's going on, by the time it gets all the way down here, it finishes executing this function, it then comes back and then picks up line 2, then line 3. So what we are doing here is we are updating the message, but it's in milliseconds. It's so quick the human eye doesn't see it, that the message is then being overwritten yet again quickly. So what we need is a way of controlling this. Now there's 2 or 3 different things we could do. We could actually turn off the message text here and control it inside the overlay. But as we've already got all of the functionality, positioning, styling already set up, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's called like a switch, a little thing that says basically yes, show this message, or no, don't show it. So if I start off by saying if switch message is equal to true, then they show, else do nothing, end. Okay, so I've now got to create this little switch message, which is a variable, but let's just copy this whole thing down here, copy, and I'm just going to wrap it there. So we're going to just take this and replace it. I think it's the same thing. It is. So there we go. Okay, so now we've got this switch message, but we're going to initially set it to true up here, because we always want to show it. It's the only time that we don't want to show it is if there's a win or a lose. So let's come up here and set this in. There's this. So let's put a local switch message equals true. So it always lives as true. The only time it's going to be set as false is when there's been a win or a lose, or sorry, a win or a draw. So let's come back down to our draw. So where are we? Check, win, lose or draw. So at this point we are then going to set switch message to false, and then that way, so we can update the message on screen here, okay, because we want it to exist. But this switch basically then controls the messages that get shown in normal gameplay. And because they are now false, we don't do anything at all. So these 2 lines of code does not execute. Now, obviously, we've got to repeat this for a winning line. But for the moment, I'm just going to hit save. And we're going to test it. So we've got to create a draw situation again. Uh-oh, it's a draw. So that's basically how we've solved it. It's a little quick fix, but likewise you might actually opt to create a whole message text variable inside your overlay scene instead. Now, if you have noticed that the text is actually not dimmed, even though the overlay is 70% of the transparent rectangle, it doesn't apply to text. Text is kind of its own rule to itself, because it doesn't necessarily be controlled by the composer in the way that you think everything else, all the other objects like rectangles and things, are controlled. Okay, so we'll come back to that and I'll show you where to find out more about that in a moment. But essentially we've got our message now being controlled on screen. Okay, so last of all, the last thing we need to do on this actual overlay is now control it when there is a winning line. So as we've actually got this code going on here already, where we've already decided to create a switch, the message text itself and the overlay, I'm just going to copy those 3 lines of code, and then where we draw the winning line, so I'm just going to scroll on up here, I am literally just going to add those 3 lines and then change the message. Now, in a future couple of episodes from now, what we will do is we will create the ability to obtain people's names. So for example, I'm Angela. Instead of saying player 1, we could say it's Angela's turn, or Angela's the winner, and that kind of thing. But for the moment, we just want to put the word winner, and then we can customize this a little bit more detail in the future. So I'm going to hit save, and with a little bit of luck, if we now create a winning line, the overlay should show and the winner message should display. And it does. So we have pretty much conquered the overlay in this tutorial. Now the only thing that I wanted to say, I wanted to show you, is that in the documentation below, I will put a link so that you can read up a bit more in your own time about how text operates and how it doesn't necessarily get controlled in the same way as other objects inside the Composer environment. So there we go, that's it from today's video. I hope you found it really useful, and if, as always, please do subscribe, put your comments below, ask me your questions, click that bell to stay notified. And in the next video, we will finish off the overlay by creating a couple of buttons, controlling those buttons that we have created on the other noughts and crosses demo that I showed you at the beginning of today's video. So have a good one, and I'll see you on the next video real soon.